Hey, Chris,
Hey, Matt.
I got an idea.
What's that?
Let's start a podcast, you and me.
Ooh, I
Mano a
love
mano.
it. What are you thinking?
Call it, I don't know, Claris Talk AI?
AI? Oh, I'm in.
All right, here we go. So
Oh, exciting.
we had 3 episodes before this one.
Yep.
Which small interviews that I did when I was in Austin. You and I didn't even really talk when we were there, which is crazy. I think that's the
Yeah.
way you can know the conference is big enough is when people you really want to spend time with, you can't or didn't.
Or yeah, you just don't
Um,
even see them. Yeah, it's a great point.
So it was really all about AI. The recordings, the conversations that I had were just kind of FileMaker people, a lot of people from Europe, and they weren't about AI. So that's what you and I are going to talk about right now. I was in your, what was it, your 400th session?
Uh, 50th.
I know.
But thank you. I know you're just doing an age joke there. No, 50. Yeah, I was really
That
proud of
wasn't
that.
an age joke. That was a compliment.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. Yeah, and thanks for coming to the session. I really like seeing your smiling face in the crowd there. And yeah, I was really excited to talk about AI to Claris folks. It was something I'd been looking forward to for a long time,
Yeah.
and we finally got to get together to do that.
So I don't know. A third of the sessions were about AI there, I think, something like that.
Yeah, I think we had certainly the big hits, like the biggest hits were Ronnie
Hmm.
talking in the general. Well, there was mention of it in the keynote,
Hmm.
and then Ronnie, of course, did his like smash hit of a session right off the top. And then I did mine that same
Hmm.
day. We had a couple other people do some sessions as well too. And I think well, and I'm not sure which ones you went to. I didn't get to as enough sessions I really wanted to desperately, but I think all the AI ones were a smash hit. Like as far as
Yeah.
attendance where it was concerned, you know.
I went to yours and only one other AI one. So those ones I'm going to watch the videos. Uh,
Yes, at the time of this recording, we do not have access to videos.
right.
Literally, the AI ones I missed are the first ones I'm going to watch, and rewatch a bunch of other stuff too. So, absolutely, yeah, that's the
Yeah.
first thing I'm going to do the second the links come out.
And it's interesting, right? So right now, FileMaker doesn't have any direct AI calls. And I
Correct.
think there's a lot of people out there who think you can just connect FileMaker to the ChatGPT, API call, and boom, you've got AI in your solution. And that's true, isn't it?
Well, no, there,
That was a
there's a
setup.
lot to. I know you're just. This is all going to be set up. This whole talk is going to be set up. I know. Well, so first of all, um, I think it's really important that we, from just a understanding what if people are listening to this, they're in the Claris community and they're curious about AI, right? Let's face it.
Hmm.
And so the number one piece of advice I would give is about ChatGPT, that it should be absolutely be part of your life as an individual who's just walking around, walking the earth and in your daily work routine. As a matter of fact,
Hmm.
Joris did a great session on, ways you could use ChatGPT to do that. But
Hmm.
ChatGPT is not AI, right? Bard, I mean, it's a flavor. It is
Hmm.
AI like a browser is the internet, basically, right?
Hmm.
Like it's a vehicle to get there. Although it's not a safe for business vehicle to get there, you shouldn't share any of your business data that way.
Well, the
And you could
API version, I thought that was
API version, you
secure.
absolutely could. That's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly what I wanted to tee up. Don't use
Yep.
ChatGPT for business, but use the API. And that's I think the other most important part is everything's just API calls. So for the Claire's folks that have ever made an API call or are just frankly aware that you can do
Hmm.
that, you're already halfway there. And
Yeah.
not only is it API calls, but it's also just taking JSON that gets returned from these models and
Hmm.
parsing it. And FileMaker
Yep.
does an
Yep. Yep.
amazing job of that. So
Wow. All day.
if you
Yep.
know those two things already, you're kind of halfway there.
And I'm not sure how
And then it's
strong
just
it is, but there's an OpenAI connector in Claris Connect. So you
the
can use
yeah,
that as
oh
well.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's another important part too. Kudos to Claris. There has been an OpenAI connector in there since last year. I think it's being updated at the time of this recording, it had not been updated for the new endpoints on the OpenAI side because
Mm-hmm.
OpenAI changed to basically just a different structure of what your API calls look like. And
Those
since
endpoints are really
connectors
confusing. I had a really hard time finding the one I needed to use to make it work. Anyway,
like the messages and user and system and all that kind of
that's
thing,
the
like
area
that
where there's like
format.
47 different numbers you can use. Like which model do you want? G3, G,
Oh, We
Yeah,
could
that.
absolutely talk about models as well
Yeah.
too. I think that's an important discussion. So yeah, there's support within flows, and by the way, there's a you can create a custom connector for it as well too. As a matter of fact, I did a training
Hmm.
day at Engage on creating a custom connector, and I used OpenAI, the new version, the new endpoints, as my example. So there's definitely ways to get in there, or just like straight up raw make an API call, just like any other API
Hmm.
call, where you're putting all your data into your curl request and you're sending that over as a payload.
Hmm.
That
Yep.
is
Yep. Yep.
really, if that makes sense from a
That's the
FileMaker
start.
perspective, you've
I
got all the tools you need.
if yeah, I think that's a one that really everybody should be aware of. If it's not a tool in your drawer, you know someone who can do it, and
Totally. Yeah.
it's not really that hard to do. Um, I'm gonna step back and say and ask a question, a dumb question. I like those. Can you share custom connectors? Like if you made one, can you share it to me?
No, well, there's no formal like share icon or anything. What you
Hmm.
do is you go in, whether it's published or you're still editing, and you copy it's basically a JSON document. It's
Oh.
not basically, it is a
Mm-hmm.
JSON document.
Hmm.
And so you copy the JSON, put it into a text editor, save it, and then you send that to somebody.
Got it.
That is currently how you share custom connectors.
That's pretty great, actually. So
Yeah, and if
there
you
can
want,
really be a community.
I can share a custom connector for the new API, Open AI
Hmm.
connector. I can share that with you if you'd like to. I'll send that to you
Yeah, I
actually.
would like that. I started playing with it. You can only do so much stuff, and it was the to get to Hello World wasn't so easy, like it is with other things.
Yeah, I think really, and it really kind of framing up what is Hello World in the first place, like what are we actually trying to do with a call to one of these AI models is probably a really
Hmm.
interesting thing to unpack. Like, I have a position on how businesses can use AI, but I also have I think almost maybe contrasting position
Hmm.
on how I personally can use it. And I do like to use it as something that I use as an alternative to search. For starters, I can't
Hmm.
remember the last time I did like a Google
Google.
search, for example. And I think that has changed everything, permanently. It's also an incredible resource from a coding perspective. And I look forward to throughout conversations with you on this, unpacking what you can actually use. Like, I think there's a lot of misconception about truth. You're going to hear me say that word a ton as we
Hmm.
talk about AI,
Hmm.
like how truthful these models are and how truthful they need to be. And as a little teaser, I'm going to tell you, we take way more responsibility for the truth that comes out of the model than the model does. I hope I'm
Mm.
teasing, and we'll
No,
get
that
into
makes
that
sense.
for sure.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with using it as a FileMaker tool. Like I would say, for example, if maybe this makes sense, it's way better as a script refactoring tool than it is at the term you and I have talked about before, zero shot. That just means so
Right.
zero shot means you just
Yeah.
ask a question and you expect in that one answer that everything you need comes back like perfectly. That's
Absolutely.
not
Yeah.
a
That doesn't work that
reality.
way. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
reality. So
Uh,
so when we're talking
yeah.
about hello world, that's a zero shot. Like literally saying, "Hey, answer a question," you're doing a zero shot.
Hmm.
But if you have a conversation and you're doing multiple calls, that's not, right? And also the magic is like, I don't know, you hear people talk about like you are a helpful assistant. There's this like system thing. There's a line in there called system, and what I think most people do is they just put you are a helpful assistant. That's kind of a nothing burger as far as like change. It's not like it was programmed to be a not helpful non-assistant.
Right.
It's like
That's what
it
Siri
already is a
is.
help. Yeah. Oh, we'll talk about that.
Oh,
We'll talk
ouch.
about Siri.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay. Okay.
especially because we think new Siri is going to come someday too. But
That
but
would be
anyhow,
good. So I'm gonna ask you two questions. We're gonna get into those conversations.
love
Uh,
it.
so first of all, this podcast is probably going to be like half regular FileMaker stuff and half AI stuff. And
Great.
also, you forgot to mention the other huge audience of the people who are in the AI community who are dying to get into FileMaker.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's got to
Just
be
knocking the
dozens.
doors down.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's at least
Um,
tens. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that was supposed to be funny. Um,
Do you have a laugh track?
I no, Petrowski actually had one of those on the podcast we did. Yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
I'll just giggle along then.
yeah, that's fine. Okay, two questions.
Yeah.
One, let's talk about foundations. Like in your session, there was really some stuff that a lot of people don't know that I didn't really know that has to be there. And then two, I want to get a real world example of an AI integration you've done because I know you do quite a few of them. Um, okay, so we made a
Yeah,
joke
proud of
earlier
that.
about just using connecting, with an API call and just go straight into the GPT model
Yep.
and have a little text field in your database that gets back, which that's not what we do. So how, what are the foundations?
Yeah, so there's really a couple sides to look at this. Is first of all, the amount of information you're sending in your API call, I think is a really important place to
Mm-hmm.
start. So I
Mm-hmm.
think the misconception is the thing you're sending is like the question, for example, or the command, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
all about chat, first of all. Like
Right, right, right.
you could absolutely just be sending a command like, hey, write a product description for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's not a question that you're getting an answer for. It's a command, but you are still getting a response. And sometimes you're asking a question as well too, right? Well, the thing is that the models themselves have so much information. They're like just such a wide array of possible answers they could give. And the transformer technology, which is what the modern day AI language models were birthed from, is all about, it's really just a probabilistic completion algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
So literally all it is you
What's the
ask a
next word?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the next word? It's just like when you're typing in Gmail or something like that.
Yep.
It's literally that exact same thing, but like times a million, like times 479 billion parameters. Like that's the
Plus,
idea.
plus it knows about all the things you've talked about before. Right. So like it's not a one shot. That's the fundamental, like one of the huge fundamental differences, which is why, like in my little ChatGPT, I keep channels for each conversation.
And you definitely
Yeah.
should. And within that conversation, and this is so important, I'm glad you brought this up. Within the conversation you're having, you have memory, right?
Right.
So it not
That's
only
why I do it.
knows the command or the question that you just asked, but it knows ones that preceded it. So what's
Yeah.
actually happening if you've had 10 questions and 10 answers in a conversation, when you send the 11th question, so to speak, you're sending the 11th question and all 10 questions and
Yeah.
answer pairs as well. So that's where the context come from. Now, there is a
Yeah.
limit to that.
I
And this
know
is one of the
it
really,
starts to really
im-
slow down after a couple hundred or so.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, here's why. Because, and this is one of the foundational elements that I think is really important for everybody to know. And that's what's called the context window, right? Like we know this idea of context in
Hmm.
FileMaker, and it took us all so long to get there to understand what that meant
Yeah.
and how it was important. And so I don't want to knock that out of people's brains, but context means something different in AI.
Yeah. Definitely.
In the case of the conversation, it means you keep doing questions, answers, and then your next one, and you're sending the whole history of the conversation over, which is
Right.
great, which is why you can do, just to kind of be practical about it, you can say, um, who is Matt Navarre? And then it comes back, historically
Right.
significant genius and the Claris space, all that kind of stuff, right? And then you go, how old is he? And then it'll answer. It's not going to say, how old is who? Like it knows
Yeah.
already because you
Right.
said. So I think that's just a really important thing for people to understand.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. When you get into about 100 of those questions and answers, especially if the answer itself is like a 10-page, it's hard to get 10
Right.
pages like ChatGPT, but
Yeah.
you could get a really long response. Eventually, you've got this window of memory. It's not like a physical window. You
Hmm.
could kind of, metaphorically think of the window inside your ChatGPT that you can scroll all the way to the top.
Right.
The problem is there's a limit to it. And that's called like a token window. So or your
Hmm.
context window, token window, whatever.
Yeah.
The reason people call it token window is because each model has a limit to how much memory it has. So when these first came out a couple years ago, and some of them are still this way, it had a 2096 token window. They always have like a multiplier. It's like
Yeah.
memory, basically. It
Yep.
is memory, actually. And
Yeah.
so, what does that mean? Well, a token isn't a word because words could be
Yeah.
supercalifragilisticexpialidocious
Nice.
or the word, thank you, nailed it. This is only our third take.
Anti-disestablishmentarianism.
Is that literally I think that is the longest word,
It
right?
was for a time. I think it's a medical
Oh,
term now.
and so obviously that in the word and, can't be
Yeah.
the same unit of measure because you're paying for this and it's memory, right? So
Hmm.
what a token actually is like a syllable. So it's like if you say Navarre, I don't know, it's really going to be two tokens. Now
Hmm.
it's not exactly syllables. There's a formula and it's all part of an algorithm.
Yeah.
But the
But
point
it
is
turns every single thing into numbers.
exactly.
Every word, every
And
phrase, every sentence, everything. Yeah.
And so what it's actually doing is completing tokens, not completing words. So that's how the algorithm works. And so
Right.
therefore, when it's trained, it only has a limited amount of memory during the training process. So the early models, like way back in the early years of
Hmm.
language models, in like 3 years ago,
Hmm.
they were only they were only like 2096 tokens could fit
Right.
in a window. So what does that mean? If you put, I'll give you a practical example. We would, and this is what we're eventually getting to. We put so much information into the curl request, so much information, Matt. You
Hmm.
saw the session. We're going to get to that here in a second. That at some point you're exceeding that memory, and it doesn't hear you anymore. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, there is a possibility that it just goes error and ignores everything you just sent
Yeah.
over, and then just answers its own thing. So you have to be really conscious of it.
Mm.
Now, if we have the same conversation next year at this time, we might not even care about token windows. And here's why. They continue to get bigger. So 3 years ago, it was 2096. As a matter of fact, 3 years ago is 2096. Let me give you a little bit of a visual
You're
on
looking
this
at the
one, my
NASDAQ
friend.
token chart.
Yeah, I'm going to show.
NASDAQ
Um,
NASDAQ
I actually
futures.
have a fun little. So let's
Oh
take a
yeah,
look
there
at
you
this.
go.
So yeah, so
So
token
some
windows.
some people
So
are getting this by audio, but it's also on YouTube.
yeah, this is how we're doing our shameless plug that you can get this on YouTube, but I'll
Yeah,
narrate this basically. So going
sure.
back to about June of 2020, that's when GPT-3 Playground, preview access first came out to the public. It
Hmm.
was 2048. Sorry, I said 2096 before.
Yeah.
And GPT-3 only had that much window. If you scroll all the way down, we won't bore everybody with this, but when GPT-4 Turbo was released, that's the latest incarnation of the GPT-4 model,
Hmm.
the fast version. That was November 2023. We're talking a high end of 128,000 tokens. And I'm excited to report that there is actually something exciting to report about Google's Gemini, and that is that buried in all of this terrible failure of launch press that they've been getting recently, there's something really exciting, and that's their Gemini 1.5. It's like a pro model
Hmm.
that has a million token window. So that
Yeah.
means send it
For those
all.
watching YouTube, I think that's February 2024,
Yes.
not 23. Yeah.
Thank you so
A
much.
million. So
Thank you
that's
so much.
crazy.
So,
So to go from 2048
yep.
up the range and basically doubling all of them to get to a million is gigantic. So
Yeah. And
I kind of think
actually,
of it in terms of like if you have a conversation with someone you just met, uh, the window, the token window is only back to the beginning of that. But when I
yeah.
talk to you, I can talk about the caffeine podcast, and that's in our window because it goes back
Yeah. It's the
20
other.
some years ago
Oh my
to
God.
Howell's Coffee, where we did a podcast recording after a
Yeah, we were
whole
we
bunch
were
of
each only
espresso.
6 years old. Yeah, at the time
Yeah.
when we did that. But no, you know what? What a great, honestly, Matt, what a great way to put that. That's exactly what it was. And so, like, if you said something to me about the caffeine podcast, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, Matt, you
Right.
would go, "What? What are you talking about? You were there. We talk about this all the time."
Yeah.
That's when you know you've lost your window, and that's super important. For as long as
Mm-hmm.
context windows are a thing, I guess I should say,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah. And then of course the conversations you and I have had over the years, but most of that has been forgotten, right? But this doesn't forget.
oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yes, correct. It does not forget. With a million tokens. So what could you do with a million tokens?
Hmm.
It doesn't even have to be a conversation. Again, I don't want to have people think that AI communications are chat. You can
Right.
literally send, I was just being somewhat disparaging about this idea of zero shot where you just send a question and you expect like all the perfect answer. Let's work backwards from there as to why you shouldn't
Hmm.
expect the perfect answer, and then we'll talk about why the token window comes into play. Well, the first reason you shouldn't expect it is because you are actually talking to like a super smart, data set. It has all the possible answers. And if all you're saying is what's the best place to do whatever,
Yeah.
whatever the question is, I don't want to get too bogged down in the actual
Yeah.
question itself.
How do you make
It
really good
has
crispy French fries? I actually asked that one recently.
perfect. Well, it has a
Yeah.
ton of different answers. There's no one answer. As a matter of fact, the
Hmm.
other thing that people should be aware of is you could ask, how do you make really good crispy French fries? and then open up another conversation and ask the same question and get a different answer. Like,
Hmm.
there's no, like, I see
Hmm.
headlines all the time in my newsfeed that say like, AI says this or whatever. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, your AI, when you asked it, said
Right.
that. And by the way, you're kind of tipping your hand as to what you had said prior to that
Yeah.
question based on the answer that you got. So that's the thing. You have complete control over what you're sending over there. And so
Right.
what my philosophy is, and this is what we do for our customers, and it's a result of a significant amount of time of trial and error. So that's why I have a lot of conviction with it, is send it everything. Send it everything
Hmm.
about you. Who's asking? Why are you asking? What are you going to do with this information when you get it? Is there any other information you can send along that might be helpful as well too?
Right.
So at a really high level, that I think is the number one most important foundational thing. And so the
Yeah.
context window, to tie it back to that and to put a bow on this, is how much of the information you can send. So we
So let's
generally do like 16K ones for business. So we can send tons
Mhm.
of information over.
So let's connect that to like a real world example.
Yeah,
I did all this work in public health. So they've got tons of years of data of
love it.
like disease surveillance stuff. Uh, you know, who got what disease, what was the outcome? I mean, it's named, but you would do AI stuff, obviously de-identified. Um, what year was it? What was their race, gender, ethnicity, blah, blah, blah. So that's a gigantic data set, right? Uh, all related, stuff like that. So if you wanted to be able to have a conversation with that data, you couldn't just do that with a plugin. What are the foundations and elements that you would have to do in FileMaker to get really meaningful results from that? You hit on this in your session, and I want to slow down and ask.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So first of all, let's play a little thought experiment. Where do the answers to your questions on that data, where do the answers actually live? Is the expectation that they live in like the model? Like somehow the model knows all the answers to those questions, or in your data? I'm leading
Yeah.
you a
No,
little bit there, but
there's no answers in the data, right? I mean, like if you say something simple like I don't know, we'll talk about disease stuff, right? What's the arc of hepatitis C and um, from 2010 to 2020? How has it
great.
changed? Something like that.
Now just to really take this one little baby step at a time, you were saying, hey, that actual answer doesn't live in the data. You're saying there is no record that literally says the answer.
Right.
The arc of hepatitis was da 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 da.
Yeah, nor is
You are
there text in there that tells me the kind of thing that I'm asking for, right? There's the data. If
correct.
I if I as a FileMaker developer, I could go write a report and something like that, but I'd have to know what I want.
Yes, you would query the data, right?
Right.
You would go into FileMaker, you do and speaking Claris language,
Yeah.
you would create a found set that includes the answers includes the data that you, the human, then can then derive into
Right.
the human language answer to your question,
I
right?
will I will lead you a little bit because you showed a
Please.
document that basically said these are the kind of answers that I would be able to get by querying the data. And then
Yep.
you showed another thing that said these are the things that I'm not going to be asking about it, right?
Yes. Correct.
Um,
So
talk about
there's
those and how much work that is to make them and where they go.
absolutely. Yeah. I would say to provide the appropriate context to what roles those are playing. There's things that you're doing even before that. You might have seen in the session. And by the way, if we remember, we'll put the links to that session in the show notes and
Okay.
the YouTube when we have access to it. But
Mhm.
even before that, even before you talk about the data, you have to talk about who you are and why you care about
Like
the
me,
answer.
the user.
Yes.
Okay.
So do you remember as a ChatGPT Plus subscriber?
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure if this is Plus because I don't know what's on the not Plus, actually, now that I'm thinking
Yeah.
about it. But there was a feature that came out that really nobody seemed to talk about, and it was called custom instructions. Does that ring a bell at all?
Yes, I've looked at it.
And for those that are listening while walking your dog, you can go into your app and you can look down in your little bottom left-hand corner where your account information is in your ChatGPT, and you can click on it, and there's a setting called custom instructions. And it's a text window where you can go in and say, this is who I am. Like, for example, I don't have anything in there, Matt, and here's why. Because
Mhm.
every time I'm interacting with ChatGPT, I could be taking on a different persona.
Right.
I could be doing it for me, Chris, or I could be doing it on
Yeah.
behalf of a client project or whatever. So I don't have anything in there. But my
But you could put
wife,
like, I'm a 35-plus-year-old FileMaker developer,
yes,
who teaches online, blah, blah, blah. And like information,
totally.
like your resume kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely. My wife, who's a special ed teacher, like actually doing good work out in the
Hmm.
world,
Yeah.
unlike the other part of the household here, she only would use it for that one purpose, right? So she could go in and say, "Look, I'm a special ed instructor. These are the ranges of the grades that I teach, or the Lexile levels." Like she could put
Yes.
in because every time she's then communicating, then that information goes along with it. So what's
Right.
actually happening in that case is she could just type in, give me a lesson plan for, whatever she's doing like
Right.
that day, right? And so what's actually getting sent over when she hits the send button is her question or command along with that big custom instruction paragraph that she wrote,
Right.
right? Every single time she sends something, that gets sent over. So what
Right.
that's doing, if you think about completion, it's actually saying, I'm this person, here's my question, now give me answer. So already, hopefully it crystallizes for everyone that
Yeah.
that will give you a more appropriate answer to your question,
Yeah.
if in fact you're asking a question,
Yeah.
than if you didn't put that.
Crystallized, spelled like Crista. Sorry. Okay.
Hello.
Okay. Let's connect this to like what you would have to do as a
Okay,
FileMaker developer with your data
so
set
so
or with
literally,
you. Yeah.
before you would ask a, so the kind of trick question that I asked you before was, where does the answer actually live? And you
Hmm.
actually gave a great answer to it. You said, well, the actual answer that I'm looking for, the plain English, this is what the,
Hmm.
the text string answer is, does not live in your database.
Mm.
But the data does. The data to answer that, the arrays of
Yep.
data, the all that information is in there. So
Hmm.
I'll go another step with the question. Does the text answer or even the data that you need to answer that question live in the model? Now that's a maybe, right? Like I think when you're talking about health services,
Hmm.
especially at a government level, it for sure doesn't live in there. Because I mean, I don't know, maybe some of that's public
Yeah.
record. I don't know the nature of it. That's probably useful to
Uh,
explore here.
well, actually, some of it
Let's
is public
assume it.
record because you can compare, like a lot of this stuff is published worldwide. So it definitely can get information, but then I have way more detailed data like in my
Perfect.
database, right?
And would you say that there's a chance, depending on the type of data, maybe not in this specific use case, is there a chance that there could be outdated data in the model because when it was
Oh,
trained in October of 2021 and your data is up to
yeah.
the minute, right?
Yeah,
So you
sure.
don't,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
and or it doesn't have the answer at all, right?
Right.
Like for example, what if you were asking about a medical procedure that was just invented earlier this year,
Hmm.
and the model that you're asking the question of was trained last year?
Yeah.
So
So
of
I ask
course
it to
that
search
data
the
can change.
internet for that thing, and I can actually
Well,
find it. Yeah.
well,
So
sure,
sometimes, yeah.
but I'm just gonna say from a
Yeah.
business use case, never search the internet. As a matter of fact, like
Hmm.
just as a pro tip, the GPTs that are out there on ChatGPT Plus, which are really cool.
Hmm.
Developers went in and they were able to put a bunch of stuff in there. Don't use any of them that have web access to it, because all that is just a wrapper to ChatGPT. Use
No,
the ones
I'm
where
talking about like using ChatGPT for whatever and ask it to search the internet.
I know. I'm
So
saying
you're saying don't
don't
do
do
that.
that for business.
Interesting.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm
for
saying
business, for business. Yes, yes, yes.
as
Because
a
that,
pro tip, don't even do that. Don't even use GPTs in
right,
ChatGPT Plus that do that. And I'm
right.
saying because the author of those in the case of a GPT has no control over the noise that's coming in. So they didn't really author anything. They just
Right.
like pointed you to other people's stuff. In the case of business, that is introducing so much noise and so much data you don't have any control over. You'll
Mm-hmm.
never do that.
Oh, that's
And
true.
plus, and plus, you can't do that in
Yeah.
your API call as a
Yeah.
data request, anyways,
Like when
as
they
as
build
your
the
payload.
model, like when they built the model, they actually did selectively pick data, right? They
Yes.
selectively picked data sources, right? They picked Wikipedia, not Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
it's nerdy.
they did Common Crawl, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a separate institution from the actual model trainers actually collected the data. None of these model trainers
Mm-hmm.
collected any of the data. They just
Mm,
used publicly available Common Crawl
got it.
data to do their training,
Okay,
which
so
is so. Now,
let's
I
go
just
back
want
to
to get the
this.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to get the point across that
Okay.
your answer is either not in the model in its training data, or if it is, you have no control over it and you don't want to rely on what that answer is to your question about the
Right.
hepatitis trend.
Yeah.
Okay. So how can you make sure that you get the right answer that's good for you,
hmm
Matt, or the user of your system with AI integration, and you get the right answer? Well, we already talked about one of them. Define who you are. That's what I refer to as a user persona. So it knows, okay, I can narrow down not only the way I'm responding to you,
hmm
but who you are. And if I have to make a call as the model, I'm talking as the model now, on should I tell them this or that, it'll be able to make those choices more accurately. Now, the big thing is, how does it know the right answer? Well, you just told me earlier, a person would sit down in front of FileMaker, go search for it, and create a
hmm
found set. The answer is in that found set of data,
hmm
right? And then the human would have to interpret that into a sentence, right? So the trick is 100% of the time you're using AI for business and you want to integrate data, you're querying the data set, coming back with the response from your data set, or from your
hmm
query.
hmm
You're including that data set with your question
Right.
in the payload.
So now
So
we're
now
talking
you've
about that
got,
token window, right?
yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it's who is asking, what are they asking, and what is the answer?
Right.
I mean, it's not, and then it's like, well, what is the language model doing? Well, the language model is doing the part where the human interprets this and knows how to answer the question, which is powerful,
hmm
extremely powerful role. But what we're doing is we are dramatically minimizing its role in the truth equation here. And I just want to linger on that for a moment, and we'll get back to the formula here,
hmm
because that is so important. If the two people that are listening to this right now take anything away from this conversation, it's that you are in control of the truth, not the model.
Right.
So the 85% of headlines about AI right now that talk about hallucinations. By the
Yeah.
way, did you know that the dictionary.com word of the year in 2023 was hallucination?
That's lovely.
And so that means that
Yeah.
majority of the focus is on what the model doesn't know.
Right.
So why would you ask the model?
Yeah. Yeah. I get
So
that.
so my
Right.
metaphor,
Ask
I
your
might have
data.
said this.
Yeah. Use the model to
You
interpret
ask
it.
the data for the truth, and then the
hmm
model does the interpretation. I
Yeah.
said
Yeah.
it's and this technique is akin to a student taking an open book exam. Like, how are you going to get
hmm
the answer wrong? I'm giving you the resource. The answer's in there. Go figure it out,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So now we've got persona, question, and
Mhm.
the actual data
Okay. So what
itself.
format are the persona and question, and how do I put those into my database? Or how do I put it into the?
Well, it's first of all, it's straight text, but it's the pro tips I would give is when you're writing those, it's really important to like let the like take any ambiguity of interpretation out of it from the model. So you would say
hmm
something like, this is what my job role is, and then
hmm
like literally big, in brackets, then
Right.
you put in the bracket of what you're, it's kind of like defining, like in a let function, when you're defining variables and you're very specific about the variable name equals, and then you put what it is, and then below you're using the variable. It's the
Yeah.
same kind of thing you're doing
Got
in
it.
these things. So
And I think
format is
some of your
important.
examples were like, summarize, salmonella cases for 20 years by county.
Yes.
Uh, and so those are
So
you put like what 100 of those things in of different kinds of things that are real that are samples of what the user would want.
Sh- Sure. I mean, whatever the most, whatever contains the answer, right? And so I think the thing that you're thinking of is what I was referring to as few shot examples, like
hmm
examples of what the answer looks like. And I know Ronnie mentioned this too. That is a separate thing from the data, the actual answers.
hmm
So I just want to be clear. I know there might be a little confusion about it. um we're not, so far what we've talked about, we haven't gotten to the examples of what I want the output to look like or
Right. Right. Right.
sound like or
Okay.
flow like. You're just straight up doing data, chunks of data. You're doing execute SQL against your own FileMaker database,
hmm
and you're getting found set of data and cramming that in there. Or you're doing a DAPI call through an API to your FileMaker database, and you're taking the result of your query and cramming that in there. Or you're doing a vector database search, which we'll talk about later because I don't want to
hmm
get on a tangent on that
Right.
technology. Or you're doing an API call to a completely different source that has data in it, and you're
Right.
getting the answer. You're putting the answers in there, and they can be non sequiturs, Matt. Like you don't have to write them. They don't even need
Yeah.
to make sense. It can just be a bunch of garbage, and somewhere in there is the answer. And the
hmm
models have the intelligence and a level of reasoning to be able to interpret that gobbledygook into the correct answer to the question that you're asking.
Okay.
If you don't do that, just to put a bow on this, you're leaving the model up to its own devices to come up with the answer.
Right.
And if the two people listening take anything away from this, if you're doing that, or that's how you think this works, you're doing it wrong, and your
Garbage in, garbage out.
expectations, yeah, the expectations for truth and accuracy should be almost zero, because
Okay.
that's what you're supplying is zero.
Okay. So, so you
And
would
we're
build
not,
this, you'd build
so
this
we're
text
moving down the
document.
list.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So,
Yeah.
well, and additionally,
Mhm.
the other parts you're talking, so by the way, what are we talking about building here? We're talking about building what's called a prompt template. Okay. So that big, huge thing you saw me talk about, like all those slides at the
Mhm.
beginning, were literally just pieces of a prompt template. So a lot of people think a prompt is just the question or the
Mhm.
input. It's actually just one piece of a huge document that is actually getting sent over. Just like
Okay.
if my wife is doing the custom instructions and then her question, and those two
Right.
things get sent over, and only one of them is exposed to the user, the other one's behind the scenes, it's almost all of this is behind the scenes.
Sure.
So we've talked about user persona,
Mhm.
the input, the question itself, and the answer.
Okay.
There's more things you can send over, actually, which I think is probably makes sense for us to explore that. And the
Mhm.
other things you can send over, as you touched on earlier, were also, here's what I don't want you to do when you're answering my question.
Mhm.
I don't want you to use flowery language, or all caps or emojis or whatever it
Mhm.
is. Like, just and usually those are called constraints. So you'll literally put after it, in all bold, constraints, colon, and then list a bullet list of things you don't want it to do when it's
Right.
answering. And those are all results of you testing your prompt template like a ton of times before you
Right.
actually go live.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're
Yeah. And then you get results you don't want. You put it in that document. Exactly. Okay. That's good.
bingo. Right. And so now that's the testing the things that you don't want it to do.
Okay.
After that is what you just described earlier. It's one of my favorite things. This is called few shot. Just think of it as I'm providing examples as well too. So let me talk about a practical problem that can solve. I was doing one of our prompt templates for a customer, and I was trying to write these bullet points in a certain format. It was like, it was like a product bullet point, like you'd see on like Amazon or something like that.
Mhm.
And so it has to be like all caps is the first part of it, a colon, and then one sentence with a certain tone followed by another sentence, and then that's it, right? And so I was trying to go into the prompt instruction, which is other things you can provide, is like, hey, by the way, when you're answering this question, make it all caps and I tried so hard to get it to do that, and it just wouldn't do it with consistency. So then I just said, look, here are 5 examples of ones that I wrote or I got from the customer, actually, in that case, that were perfect.
Mhm.
And I said, don't, like, it's not about the information that's in those examples. That's this few shot learning is what we're
Mhm.
doing. It's about the format and the tone. And I specifically say, just pay attention to the format and the tone. We're not teaching it anything with that other than what the tone or format or style or example might be.
Okay.
Another one is you could literally say, like, you're writing product descriptions. You can go find the greatest product description that a human ever wrote in the history of your customer and say, give me that. And then you literally at the end of your prompt template go, and by the way, this is like a perfect example of what I want you to do.
Mhm.
And it will be really faithful to that. So that's what's called few shot learning. Those go into your prompt template as well too. So in summary,
Got
just
it.
so we don't lose anybody, user persona hidden behind the scenes, but it's
Yep.
part of your curl request payload. The actual input itself, right?
Mhm.
Then the answer, which is called context. That's the AI version of context, the actual answer from your data, your database search or your
Mhm.
API call or whatever.
Mhm.
Then examples or your few shot
Mhm.
learning examples of what you want the output to either look like or flow
Mhm.
like, or here's the perfect example, not the information that's in it. Who cares? It's smart enough to know you're just talking about format or style or
Right.
something. Then you send that all over as part of your payload. And there's a ton of
Right.
other stuff you can cram in there, but I think
Yeah.
that's
So, and
good for
every single
today's
one of those
lesson.
goes with every query.
Yes.
And then also you're going to get back the queries that you've made before and maybe the answers it's given you before.
Yes.
So
That's a ton.
yeah, so
There's
it's going to be a lot of data. Yeah.
It is. And and this is why token windows are so important, but you know, that discipline that I just mentioned is so critically important to getting truth and accuracy out of your AI
Right.
integrations that I'm like, I'm so happy to see that like a million token window model is already here in, as you indicated
Yeah.
before, February 2024. That means by like the end of the year, like when GPT-5 comes out, it'll be like a million or something. And
Yeah.
like when all the rest of them come out, they'll all be a million. So that basically means like throw it all in there, throw everything you can. And so the art of prompting is going to be about how much information and instruction can I send to this thing. So
Mhm.
by the time I tell it who I am and what answer or what question I have and what the answers are and what I want the answers to look like and maybe some other guardrails and stuff and some other
Mhm.
guidance and then constraints and all that, by the time it gets down to completion, you've narrowed that completion probabilistic algorithm to such a small degree that you will for sure get the correct answer that you're looking for. That I think is the most
Right.
important foundation of integrating AI into your
And then when
applications.
it's all working, you can just say cure hepatitis and then poof.
Well, I mean, sure. Yeah, I mean, maybe. I
Yeah.
mean, listen, there that will happen at some
Yeah.
point. I'm telling you, Matt. Like
It
that will
actually,
definitely
now that it actually is treatable, you can actually get it. If it's not too late, you can actually, there's a drug to actually cure it. And it's preventable. It's one of the, it's now a possible disease to eradicate. It's not going to happen in a really long time, but it's a really, really
well,
awful disease.
I think when you're talking about curing disease, I mean, that's profound, right? Like that's a
Mhm.
profound responsibility to try to lay on something like AI.
There's only one, well, I mean, we've cured smallpox. That's it. That's the only disease in human history that
Yeah.
we've eradicated.
Well, but I think it's, call me a heretic, but here's why I think it's more possible that we cure these things now that we have tools like AI at our
Mhm.
disposal. And the reason is because of the essentially what AI is doing for you is giving you human brain capacity of
Mhm.
processing times X or, X, right?
Right.
So, and we're not talking like twice as smart as a person would be. We're
Right.
talking like
Millions.
millions of,
Yeah.
so like when you think about like, as human beings, we have a level of reasoning where we go, all right, well, I'm making a decision and I can at least interpret what the possible consequences might be of
Mhm.
this decision. This could happen or this could happen, right? And that's how we live our lives. And we just do the fork in the road,
I'm
decisions
gonna,
one
I'm
after
gonna,
another.
I'll throw something at you. There's a book
Okay.
called Thinking Fast and Slow. Did you read that
Oh my
book?
God. Did I? Not only that, but I'm so glad you brought that up. Oh my
So
God,
it
Matt.
sounds,
And
it
hey,
sounds like what you're talking about is that
is
AI
system
can
two.
can do think fast and slow at the same
Okay.
time.
Let's first of all
Right.
let I can't believe we didn't even do a rehearsal, Matt, and this is so
Yeah.
perfect. So
Anyway.
here's the deal. That book is, first of all, not about AI.
Right.
Okay. I only learned of it because last year I was doing a bunch of experiments. You can find them on at iSolutionsAI
Mhm.
YouTube, where I was looking at something called this concept of theory of mind. We don't have to get into that now. I suggest we actually do a theory of mind topic in
Mhm.
a later episode as a tease. But ultimately, what that led me to was collaborating with a clinical psychologist in the UK who found these experiments. And she was saying, oh my God, like you're doing clinical psychology experiments against AI. This is so fascinating. Let's talk about it. So her and
Mhm.
I did a huge talk about that. It's also on YouTube. And she introduced me to the concept of thinking fast and slow, which is a Daniel starts with a K. We'll figure it out. We'll put the link
Kahneman
in the YouTube. Kahneman? Yeah. And
might
I'm not
be.
even sure I knew how to
I've read some
pronounce
of
it.
his books, so I'm not really sure if that's he's the
You'll
author or not.
definitely, when you
Anyway.
search for, I
Yeah.
almost said Google, when you search for the book. So what the premise of
Yeah.
that is that the brain thinks in two different ways. There's a fast, which is really based on heuristics and like sort of a short-term memory, like immediate response.
But it's
You,
genius level, right? It
well,
connects things together. Like the example that they give is an art curator with a ton of experience walking into a museum, looking at a statue and says, it's a fake. Where
bingo.
where where it would take a huge amount of research and all kinds of other testing to know, but a human can actually sometimes,
Well, yes.
connect all
Conversely,
these neurons in a crazy way.
yes. If so the thinking fast is
Hmm.
what they refer to as system one
Hmm.
processing, right? And then the thinking slow is system two.
Hmm.
So what you just described is thinking fast with processing power, like beyond, like you have to be a complete genius. Like there are humans that have so much experience and so much knowledge and so much context already that they can just look at something and go, yeah, that's a fake,
Well, every
right?
human has that in their world.
We do, no
Yeah.
question about it. Now, that is our brain And by the way, that is probably driven more by heuristics than it is about information. It's just like, oh, I've seen this before. I've
Yep.
heard this before.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
when I've been in this scenario before, I've seen this. So that's what we're bringing into it. And that, so I think I have some posts that I did about this thinking fast and slow as it pertains to AI. And the comparison that I was drawing was, I think that the ChatGPT, the zero shot, like just ask a question, it gives an answer. It's all about speed there, right? It's all about the speed of the response. How quickly can we get a response? It's not like you ask a question like you did about the hepatitis question earlier, and then you walk away from your machine and tomorrow morning you come back and it has the perfect answer. Like, we don't have the patience for that as consumers.
Yeah.
But today's AI is thinking fast with tons of information.
Well,
And
actually, I would
response
say
time.
it's using the thinking slow methodology, right?
Well,
If I said what's 2 to the 19th, you could figure it out by saying 2, 4, 6, 8, 16, 32, 64, and you
but
could
you
write it
just,
down and you could slowly
yes.
get an answer, right?
Well, right, but so yes and no, because what you just described, what our modern day AI does is pass off to tools that can do that very fast. Like, for example,
Exactly.
if
That's what I'm
you
saying.
ask,
Right.
you integrate in like Python to do your math for you, or
hmm
some library that does that correctly.
Right.
But the true thinking slow, as it will be, as what my prediction is,
hmm
that there will be our AI experiences will actually be thinking slow, which to me means like agency, like
hmm
multiple threads running and research happening, and then they come
Yeah.
back and compare. The
Yep.
models are comparing research with each other, and like this actually takes, minutes or hours or something like that to do. It just happens to have so much information and tool set at its disposal that it's thinking fast. The system one
hmm
is actually really impressive, because humans, we don't have the capacity of that knowledge base available
Right.
to us.
Yeah,
If we
exactly.
did, we could answer all those. But I guess what I'm saying is, there's another wave of this coming, like sooner
hmm
than we think, that is truly going to be thinking slow, that incorporates multiple models. And
Right.
have you heard of agents and stuff? Like, that is still coming, and I think is a really important thing. And so the book, listen to the audiobook, read it, go ask ChatGPT for a synopsis, because I think it'll really frame up what things are doing now, why it's amazing, what we're seeing with AI, and where it's going at the same time. And
hmm
this was just inspired by a clinical psychologist who understands how the brain works, and she mapped that to me. So it's so great to hear you talk about that. I really think that everyone should check that out. It's actually one of my predictions of the future. I think I did that's what I did. At the beginning of the year,
hmm
I did my predictions in AI for 2024,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think one of my 5 was about system 2 processing, or system 2 thinking. So
Right. Okay, sweet. All right, let's get to a real world example. Were there any
yes.
other key foundational things that we need to know about? And we're going to go into much more detail in future episodes, but
Yeah, I
anyway,
think
for now.
we'll keep today's discussion to the prompt template. How's that? We'll even
Right.
put that in our description. Like, we're talking about prompt templates, and just in case people have zoned out a little bit with our thinking fast and slow, a prompt template is the stuff that you're sending over as your API payload in Claris, in FileMaker, in your insert from URL, which, by the way, is the only tool you need to incorporate AI into your Claris systems. Just
hmm
want to be clear about that. That's in your curl request, that calculation window that comes in, and you're doing the name value pairs and
Yep.
saying this value equals this. You can put as much as you want into that window. It is only limited by your context window. This is just a review of the things we've talked about so
hmm
far today.
hmm
So as long as, and you can test out your prompt template, by the way, when you're writing it and you do a couple of sample searches in your health systems database, and it comes
Yeah.
back with, tons of data. You can go online, and there's actually tools that do this, but you can just go online and search for something called the tokenizer. And it is a OpenAI tool. Other people have tools as
hmm
well. And there's like a Python thing that does it, that just, you can paste all your text into it. It comes back and says, okay, you're at 3,400 tokens
Right.
right now, right?
FileMaker has a limit of how much data you can have in a curl request, so doesn't it?
I would assume that it does. We
Yeah.
have not run into that challenge
Couple
yet.
million. I know like
And
you can only have so much text in a calculation, for example.
yeah, and really what it is a calculation window, right?
Yeah,
So
it's a
whatever
calculation
that
window.
is. So when, so Claris platform will have a problem when that limitation is exceeded by the windows themselves, right?
And I
Now,
know
keep
some
in mind,
developers have already hit that in just other things like processing big JSON arrays and stuff like that.
absolutely, and
Yeah.
sending data as a parameter over on a call or
Hmm.
certainly have. And so that's a very real thing. Now, keep in mind, you can segment your calls. You don't need to send everything over. Like, for
Right.
example, you could say, hey, write me a product description, and then you take that product description and then you come back and go, now rewrite it for me as the
Hmm.
persona. Like, you could do this in multiple calls, but let's
Yeah,
just hope that
you should also be able to make a call to like your own AI server, which would have all the information on the other side, right?
yes.
Uh,
Yeah, actually,
yeah.
so in some of the like kind of like super sophisticated AI implementations that we
Hmm.
create, we actually have we build those as multi-user systems where user management is what's handling the persona. So we say Cris has an account to access this AI system, Matt has an account, and when Cris logs in, oh, by the way, this is his big persona, and as
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
secret, also here's like all the questions Cris has been asking, and we're going to do some modeling and really continue to fine tune and model what he cares about. So that doesn't need to go
Yeah.
over with the call. That can be applied in a separate call, to your point.
Okay.
Um,
So,
so additionally, though,
hmm,
to give
then I got
like
something.
two more examples on the prompt template,
Okay.
you can send guidance as well. Now, the example, you might remember this from my session where I was giving an example of writing product descriptions for one of our customers, right?
Hmm.
And their marketing department came back and said, "Oh, hey, cool, you guys are using AI. We have guidelines. Like, it's cool that robots are writing these product descriptions and everything, but we have guidelines that the human people who are writing these have to follow. Our brand voice. There's certain ways that there's certain in different regions we shape things differently and we respond differently, but mostly like." Hey, there's a way we talk about our products, and we got to make sure that AI isn't just like coming up with its own thing. So
Hmm.
in that case, we said, cool, where are those documents? And they sent us over a big document that was called brand voice guideline. Like, literally, here's the guideline for humans, right? Now, I took that PDF, I put it into the aforementioned tokenizer, and it told me it was 9,000 tokens. And this was back like
Right.
a year plus ago when we only had 8K,
Hmm.
8,000 tokens to work with. So I go, well,
Yeah.
that's not going to work. So what I did is I took the document and I spent maybe 45 minutes in another AI system, and I condensed it down. I did this exercise where I said, hey, AI, here's a document, parse out all the data from it now, and then I want you to go through it and condense it in a lossless manner. Like, that's a keyword that I use
Mm-hmm.
so that it doesn't lose any of the information, get all the redundancy out of it, and get any noise out of there that's not specific instruction. And then, oh, by the way, format it in this manner that creates a pattern, right?
Yeah.
I was able to get the 9,000 plus token resource document down to like, it was like 3,500 tokens. So I said, take that 3,500 tokens of information, smash that into the prompt template as
Right.
well. And then one last step, legal came back, because I know everyone's thinking about legal compliance. So I think we
Hmm.
got to address
Hmm.
this. Their legal department, which is a big legal department,
Hmm.
that said, cool, it's cool that you guys have robots writing this stuff,
Hmm.
but we can't make any claims that our products do things that they don't do.
Right.
And we have these very specific guidelines that human copywriters are supposed to adhere to. And so we said, guess what, Matt? What did we say? Give us those
Yeah.
guidelines. And we did the exact same thing. And so in that case,
Our mineral water cures hepatitis.
hey, problem solved.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
half the time you predicted. But the point is that instruction, I refer to all that as instruction. If you have the benefit of having that, grab it, go through that condensing process, throw it in your
Right.
prompt template, and you will get amazing, perfect, like guideline specific responses back that you have 100% control over. So that is our prompt template in review to end the topic and
Hmm.
end this part of the topic. Who are you? User persona.
Hmm.
What question are you asking? What are some of the guidelines that you need to follow? Legal
Hmm.
ramifications,
Hmm.
brand or whatever. What are examples of the output formats or tone or style
Hmm.
that you want? And most importantly, what's the answer? What's the data that you want the language model to process to
Hmm.
derive your answer? And that's what's called context. And you send all that over as payload in your API calls, and then you get back, mwah, chef's kiss.
Yeah.
of responses.
Okay. Part two. Give me a recent implementation, like a small one, not a gigantic one, that used stuff like this and kind of what they did. You can make up a different industry if you don't want to give client stuff away, but
Sure.
because I think
Well,
a lot of FileMaker developers are seeing this as a solution in search of a problem. And
oh,
and it's
yeah.
not.
No, it's
But
not.
the
I
way to show that
definitely.
it's not is to actually come up with some real world examples of how you made a meaningful difference in an organization.
No question. So first off, just to do a really easy one, what I was describing before was actual several different references to creating a product description. And I say that
Hmm.
because like I think what most FileMaker developers or most people that are just starting to explore AI think AI does is just write text, just output text, right?
Yeah, or make images,
And we
but
can
yeah.
talk about, yeah, we can talk about audio outputs and video
Hmm.
outputs and all sorts of cool and video inputs and all that kind of stuff later, but we'll just focus on text for today's discussion. And in that case, writing as I mentioned, a product description, that was a real like thing for a customer that humans were doing. And then now AI is doing that for them. That is an actual like generative use case example that can be done. Like a lot of people hear about like writing summaries of meetings. That's like
Hmm.
table stakes, like whatever. You can do that with ChatGPT. It's fine.
Yeah.
But
It's
to
also
like write,
automatic. I mean, well,
everything
Zoom has
does
a
that now too.
function for it, and then there's I can't remember the other one I use.
Well, and that's,
Fathom AI is actually really good
oh,
at
it's
that.
so,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, Otter's got it built in, Zoom's got
Yeah.
it built in. Like don't be that person that came up with that idea 2 years
Hmm.
late because like you're just gonna like it's not a product anymore. It's just a feature, right?
Yeah.
So but you should at least be doing that. Like our system at iSolutions, all of our meetings are summarized into who said what the next steps
Mm.
are, and what your tickets need to be created. Like you should at least be doing that, right?
Yeah. All right. So
So
that's a good example. The product, and obviously that's vastly more than you can get by just sitting at a thing and typing prompts into ChatGPT 4, right?
I think so. Yes,
Yeah.
I feel strongly that that's the case.
Yeah.
And also like yes, so I don't know if we want to blow up that example if it makes sense to people. Like that is, I think, a really good one. It is, I want something to output into like a FileMaker field, show up in a report or something. I want that created for me. Or, if we want to get
Hmm.
even more simple, doing daily reports of something. Like if you're, dispatching people out into the field and they're collecting all this information and then they got to go back to their hotel and they got to like type up these reports or everything. You don't need to do it that way. You can just say, go do your collection and then just go home at the end of the day. And the system will then take all of your information and write it in the format and derive meaning from it and actionable insights in a manner that might make sense. It's similar to the meeting summary thing, but
Hmm.
there's more intelligence and guidance that's necessary to do those kind of things right. So those, I think, at the level that we're talking about, at least, are probably pretty good examples for what this could do. Um, I mean, and honestly, I'm just trying to hold back on all the crazy cool stuff you can do with AI just to try to keep it simple. I don't want to get all excited and then knock out of people's minds what they think they're understanding us say here as we talk about it here. It's not a intelligence thing. It's just an experience thing. And so product descriptions, bullet points, keywords for SEO, other ways to say something, actionable items, insights. Insights is my big thing. Like, really what you were describing with the hepatitis
Hmm.
data set was really provide an insight based on the study of this data that would answer my question. And to
Right.
me, that is providing not only the data chunks that are coming from your database,
Hmm.
but giving it access to tools as well too. So like you can, if for those who haven't used Python, and I was one of those people like 2 years ago, and thanks to the Copilot, I taught myself how to do it. I'm an old man, and I just submitted. Oh, by the way, let me just tell all the other old men out there who are afraid to learn new things in our marketplace, which is
Hmm.
like everyone, and
Yeah.
then I'm not gonna say old women because the women in our group are smarter than us, old
And
guys,
and
so,
typically
and
younger, I've noticed.
and younger as well too. I'm talking to the old
Yeah.
guys. I'm talking to
I
the
know, I
Gray
know, I
Temple
know.
dudes.
Yeah,
And
because
what
I
I'm
mean,
saying,
back in the day, just for whatever reason, IT was just all men when we were in our
yeah,
20s. But
look, we weren't doing that on purpose. I don't,
yeah, I
I
know
had
we
no
weren't.
control over that. It's just what the reality of the circumstance was, and I'm glad that's not the case anymore. But
Me
for
too.
those who, whatever where you are,
Hmm.
who are just, stuck in the old paradigm, the I'm really proud of this. I taught myself Python using Copilot, and just in January, I submitted. I'm a sports guy.
Hmm.
Sports is this thing where I don't know, jocks do it, I guess, or whatever, right? But
Hmm.
I'm a huge sports guy, and frankly, I'm glad I am because that's what got me into machine learning and AI in
Hmm.
the first place.
Hmm.
And I submitted to something called the NFL Big Data Bowl, where they give you a ton of data, and then you have to hypothesize ways to model the data that might be useful to NFL coaches and teams and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So they just have this open call. It's like a hackathon, but you have to submit it as Python. So I used Copilot, taught myself Python, and I submitted, dude. I submitted my first. No one helped me besides Copilot. I
Yeah,
tested it. I iterated on it. It took me a couple months to do it. I'm so
yeah,
proud I did that. Everyone can do that. I'm not a smart dude. Like, I don't know anything about Python. I could do a little bit of JavaScript. I could read it and, carve up other people's
yeah.
JavaScript like crazy, but I don't know that kind of stuff. And I still was able to figure out enough to understand it. Now, what that led me to understand is even though I can't write it, I was like, oh my God, Python's got all the tools that I need. ChatGPT can't do math, but Python can do math better than an entire arena full of data scientists, right?
Yeah.
So why don't I figure out when I need to send something off to that arena full of data scientists to do some algorithmic processing? And
Hmm.
to your question about hepatitis before, I would probably write some instruction to employ some of those models that I know are science specific trained model, Python tools and packages. I would probably incorporate those into my instruction at the same time. So thinking it's just a question
Hmm.
answer machine and then going,
Yeah,
oh, it got a wrong answer, and then you walk
yeah,
away
yeah,
all
yeah,
satisfied that this is one more thing you don't need to learn is irresponsible because that's not what AI does at all.
yeah, yeah. I get that.
Well, I know,
Um,
I know you
but I
do.
mean, it's definitely worth repeating. So we can, as a FileMaker community, kind of, really
Yes.
embrace this uh, in ways that could make our customers, our databases better.
Oh,
All right.
I listen.
You want to go
I
for
and
another hour or two, or should we wrap it up soon?
I think we did a great job. In summary, for those that hung in the end here, what we talked about today was prompt templates. All the stuff that you send over in your API payload in your curl request that you need to send over so that you can get the correct answer and insights,
Yeah,
including your own data. Now, we can probably talk in upcoming episodes. I think we should focus on a couple of things like where do we get that data from? Obviously, FileMaker databases, but we can talk
yeah,
about API calls. And I think we should need to have a conversation about embeddings and vector databases. We can have a whole conversation about that. So
yeah, yeah,
important,
yeah. I
like
would love to talk
things
about
like
that.
semantic search.
All
And
right.
then I think in upcoming episodes as a tease, we'll talk about image inputs, super cool, video
Hmm.
inputs and outputs, audio inputs and outputs. We're going to have a lot of fun getting into some of the fun weeds. I promise that anybody who's leaving this not inspired will, in fact, be inspired by upcoming
Upcoming
discussions
things.
that
All
you and
right.
I have. I can't wait.
Sweet. Chris, it's always awesome to talk to you.
I look forward to our next chat.
All
Thanks,
right.
everyone.